Welcome to Under the Sisterhood, where we honor female experiences. During each episode, I will have intimate conversations with women of all ages to get under the hood of their individual journeys through womanhood. Together, we'll pursue the many aspects of the female experience, creating a sacred space for women to share their stories, their ideas, and their wisdom. This is a podcast to celebrate women and recognize all that they do in our world. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. I'd like to welcome and honor Dr. Huma Baig. Huma is a daughter, sister, granddaughter, friend, yogi, healer, and surgeon. She's a second-year general surgery resident at Beth Israel Hospital in Boston with an interest in trauma surgery. She is a graduate of Harvard Medical School and Yale College. Huma is a beautiful, brilliant woman who has made it her purpose to heal others. She is a first-generation Pakistani American who grew up outside of Chicago. Welcome, Huma. I'm so thrilled and so honored to have you here today.
Oh, that's so sweet. No, thank you so much for having me.
Now, I mean, these conversations around womanhood and our female experiences and the sisterhood have been so emotional and so special, and every woman brings something so unique to the conversation. So why don't we get going, if that's okay?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Good. So the first one's a big, vast question, but an important one. What does being a woman mean to you, Huma?
Wow, it is so vast. Oh, wow. What does it mean to be a woman? Well, I am a scientist, so I guess so, a doctor. So hard definitions are a good place to start, right? So being a woman is a societal construct, right? And I think inherent in that means that sort of it's determined socially what we culturally as well think what it means to be a woman. It's associated with a lot of different practices and different identities and behaviors, but it's so hard to define. I think it's difficult. I would need to write a whole book on that.
So I mean, so that's interesting from a scientist's
Mhm.
point of view, thinking of it in terms of constructs. If you just step back and just for a moment, just blurted out how you felt emotionally about being a woman. So you go straight towards your scientific mind, your left brain, right? And but what would your right brain, because you're so creative as well, like how does it feel, or how do you feel being a woman in terms of the meaning?
Yeah. Um, Being a woman is creative, um, being light, being enlightened, um, you know, being a giver, being nourishing, um, being having the ability to adorn yourself with beautiful things. I think that's something that's intrinsic to womanhood. And also I think intrinsic is having a lot of being historically marginalized and having a tough go at finding your way in the world. It's kind of paradoxical.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. It's interesting that you added the adornment thing. I think that is a Western culture too, cultural thing as well, but it's definitely, I think, Eastern because of some of the positions. That's really interesting. Yeah, answer. Yeah, and it is
Mhm.
paradoxical. It definitely is paradoxical. But I do love you. You definitely covered the giver, the nurturer. We are givers, we are nurturers. There's a great book. I've mentioned it, Shel Silverstein's The Giver, The Giving Tree, not the giver, sorry, The Giving Tree. And it talks about the tree being the tree's the mother, and the tree,
Mhm.
the son needs the mother, and she keeps giving parts of her tree, the branches, different things. And in the end, she's the stump and he's sitting on his mother. But anyway, I think it's a really, really interesting metaphor, a good metaphor,
Mm,
and an interesting comment. So with that, I think you hit on some really, I think topical and cultural things. What has your female experience been like? And when I ask that question, it's like you're in your late 20s. What has your
yeah.
female experience been like up until now? And at what point would you have said that you felt like you were a woman, that you recognized whether it was a moment, a period in time?
Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth, it's like, I think the reason why that first definition of being a woman, it's so broad and it's so hard to pinpoint is because it's so influenced by the the culture that you're a part of and the time in your life that you're in and sort of the kind of expectations, the economics of things, and how, yeah, what historical moment that you're in. And I feel like for me, um what your first question was, what what has my experience of womanhood been, right? So I can't help but mention how heavily I've been influenced by um, the religion that I was raised in Islam, and there's been so much of my um, how I learned to be a woman that was it clashed completely with the world I grew up in. So, being a hyphenated person, being Pakistani American, like you said in my introduction, um, very different definitions of womanhood in Pakistan and in the United States. And so, growing up, it was oftentimes it was difficult because it would be something as simple as, in Pakistan, once you get to a certain age, or in any Muslim culture, once a woman gets to a certain age, probably when she starts like menstruating, um, she needs to make sure that she doesn't wear certain clothes that are too revealing. And in that culture, that meant nothing above, no shorts or no skirts, and nothing below, nothing shorter than a short sleeves t-shirt. Um, Definitely no bikinis. And so it was hard to reckon with that sometimes growing up. And I think definitely is a sort of pick and choose. And I had to learn to figure out what fits into my sense of womanhood, as I've gotten a little older. But it was that clash would be present in something like that to um, what does love mean? Because in the culture that my parents grew up in, love, romantic love was not something that was really welcome. And my parents had an arranged marriage, and so romance was kind of my parents were more open-minded about that, but there's definitely a lot more arranged marriages and family input, whereas in the West, a lot of being a woman is about, I feel like, finding your identity through your sexuality and, you know, exploring that, but that was not welcome in my parents' culture. But I guess I would say I started feeling like a woman, honestly, when I've started feeling more like a woman since I've started working after finishing medical school. So maybe in the last couple of years.
Actually, there's nothing to be, don't laugh. I mean, well, you can laugh, but it's not embarrassing. I was having a conversation the other day and a woman said, yeah, I started feeling like a woman, when I had my child. And I said, well, I can identify with
Yeah.
that. Or the year before I had my child, I said, I actually started feeling like a woman, like recognized it. It wasn't about getting my period and all those phases the first time you have sex, but
Right.
it was literally when I was pregnant with my first child. So for you to feel that later in life is actually a wonderful thing because it allows it allows the innocence of childhood to, and that other side of you to sort of it's why you were able to become a doctor, because you were so focused on your studies and advancing yourself. So, and not as
Mhm.
focused on the other things that a lot of us have been focused on. So I think, I think it's a good thing actually, because I think then you'll know yourself better as well. So not that we didn't know ourselves, but so I'm not putting anyone else down, but I'm just trying to say you should feel very good about that, where I sense the giggling was little bit of discomfort.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't think about that. Do I consider myself a woman? But I think there is this also a certain sense of independence, and now I know that traditionally maybe not as like associated with being a woman, but now in the world that we live in, I feel like um, just living on one's own and kind of being in control of one's life feels more like womanhood, that power.
Yeah, it's pretty friggin' powerful. So you keep at it. That's fantastic. I like that. Independence is something, once you get that, that's interesting. That's the first time that that was connected quite as directly as what you just put. And you're right. I think being independent leads you towards that feeling of womanhood.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So this is a fun question. I mean, at least I think it's fun. What would you tell your 18-year-old self? So imagine I'm Huma at 18. So because you're looking at
Yeah.
me. So you're mirroring, and you have this opportunity to go back in time and talk to her. What would your message be to whom the 18-year-old Huma?
Well, I at 18 was very much just focused on school, being a good student, and I think that was at the expense of other areas of development in my life, and I think I did the right thing. And I would say don't feel so insecure about your choices, because the other parts of, I associate being a woman with also owning owning your sexuality and owning your like your identity as a person, and you know engaging with your beauty and kind of understanding like what celebrating yourself as well. And I think I didn't do that nearly as much as I do now, and it's still a work in progress. But I was so busy with my studies that um, didn't really make time for that. But I think that all comes naturally with time. So
So the message there is to not be insecure, to sort of embrace type of thing. Not be
yeah,
insecure. You commented about your decisions and stuff and your path.
yeah. I guess I felt like I didn't know if those other things were going to happen for me. Like, I felt sort of like a late bloomer because I was, um, I wasn't fashionable, or I didn't really embrace myself fully in the way that I do now, and it comes with time.
It
You
does come
know?
with time. And that's just so beautiful that you're embracing yourself now because you're recognizing that. And sometimes I think in life, when you're so busy doing and you're on that mill of trying to just accomplish things, so whether it's studies, whether it's a job, whatever it may be, you aren't really taking that time to celebrate those more they're tangible, but they're also intangible things, that feeling you feel, that glow you have as a woman and stuff that you get as
Right,
time passes and you realize that you are one heck of a badass, like you could do anything, leaning
right.
into your power. I didn't mean to be crude, people, sorry. So yeah, so that brings me to today. We're in this like
Yeah.
crazy world we live in today. How do you feel about being a woman in today's world? Like, what does that feel like for you, Huma?
Yeah. It's ever changing, we have a lot of political tumult, a lot of people in power deciding what it means to be a woman, especially recently with, the, decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Um, that being said, I am really fortunate to live in a very liberal state where that's not as much of an issue, but it feels like it's something that affects everyone in today's world in the West, in the United States especially. Um, it affects kind of our collective sense of womanhood. Um, so it's contentious, right? But I think, especially the world that I operate in, which is world of, I'm training to be a surgeon. Traditionally, it's a field that was not very welcoming to women. Medicine in general is not welcoming to women, but more and more, the culture and culture is changing to accommodate people who identify as a woman but want to, make their lives, their work, their lives, but also accommodate people, both men and women, or people who are non-binary, who want to have something outside of that workplace and have a family, or be a full person. Um, so it's very rapidly evolving.
Yeah, I think going into medicine's really tough. I've heard plenty of stories in my family about that, and even professor stories where, academia, the limits that happen as soon as you announce that you're pregnant, suddenly you're not a star. But I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Um, you're right that not too many female surgeons out there, but lean into it and be strong and have your voice and take up space, put your elbows out, and you walk with your head up high and your shoulders back, because you're there because you earned your space there, and recognizing that you so much deserve to be there. I want to so I'm going to poke a little on this topic about being a woman in today's world, because I know you go back to I know that you were born in
Hmm.
Chicago, outside of
Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah. So, but I know that your family's so you're first generation Pakistani. When you go back there, so you have a really interesting point of comparison. So you come over here, it doesn't even matter that you're in Massachusetts, Boston, or wherever. Comparatively, it's like you're free and you can do whatever you want and you have so many choices. So do you see is that how you see it? Even with the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, what does that mean to you? Because you have such a unique perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in Pakistan, the being a woman is so linked to other people's wants and other people's needs, and you know it the culture over there is very much family oriented, and you're a part of, it's very communal. And um like, for instance, my mom, when she married my dad, she kind of um didn't want to be a burden on her family, and my dad seemed like an appropriate match, and it just seemed to make sense, and it kind of was the right thing to do. But there wasn't this sense of like deep underlying passion and romance. But I think here, growing up in the United States in comparison, and it's like I I'm very lucky that my parents encouraged me to work really hard in school, and pursue opportunities that were going to take me far away from where they were. But I feel like growing up here, it was it's about my life, and sometimes that comes into conflict, because my parents still have some beliefs that are more communal, like they really care who I date, or they kind of, there's still an aspect to the culture that they practice where like my decisions affect everybody. And so it's kind of tough to navigate, and definitely growing up it was really really frustrating because I felt like other people had freedoms that I didn't. um but yeah, it's been challenging.
I think that's really interesting, and I'm so sorry because that's really hard. I think, there's two
Mhm.
sides to your
Thank
life.
you.
It's you as the American, and it's you from where your family comes from
Yeah.
culturally. And I would imagine it's so hard navigating the two of those and making sure that you maintain. I mean, the beauty is, and you should feel so proud, you are so autonomous and you're your own person, and you went to these amazing schools and you accomplished so
Mhm.
much in them, and you're off now at a wonderful hospital pursuing surgery. I mean, that's just amazing. And you did that because of who you were. Now, yeah, they gave you the runway, they encourage you to work hard, and now it's your life to and your platform to be who you are and do what you want to do. And I think that there's so much for you to be proud of, because that is I mean, I've never experienced that. So it's really,
Mhm.
when you go against sort of the system in which you grow up in, and that was in your home. So,
Mhm.
kudos to you. You should be like, what a woman, what a woman.
Oh,
So,
you're
so
so
I think
you're so
I
kind.
think this next question sort of, it's a nice continuation. So that's about, how you felt being a woman in today's world. But this one is like, if you could change anything, what would you want to change to make life better for women? And by the way, I think it's great that you're crisscrossing your your multiple lives, if you will, because
Mhm.
I think that message is really important.
Yeah, I think we need more support in being able to decide the lives that we want for ourselves. I think like there's kind of we've entered this era where like women shouldn't be thought of as only only role as being like childbearing, or that they shouldn't we have we I think a lot of us are very much against these traditional ideas about what it means to be a woman, like being the primary caregiver for children, or like being the one who I think like bearing all of the responsibilities of the home and kind of these like domestic sort of roles, right? But I think at the same time, I think there's sometimes this undue pressure for women to be so um like that they should always pursue their careers, or they should always pursue these things that like leave them outside of the home. And I feel like at the end of the day, it should be up to someone's own choice and own volition, like what they want, what someone wants to pursue. Like I think be spending time with your family and wanting a family and a simple life, and focusing on that as a really fulfilling thing is just as valuable and meaningful, and brings just as much um like goodness into the world as pursuing a career. But we might not be there yet where I can say that, but I kind of sometimes feel this that's kind of how I feel like women should just be able to do whatever they choose.
Yeah, I like that. That's really, really smart. I couldn't agree more. I think it's really hard. I think women need to lean into who they are. I like the volition comment that, whatever their volition is. And I think it's really tricky. I mean, I, I didn't, I wasn't a working mom. I mean, I did need to work, but I'm a creative. I loved work. I loved coming up with ideas. I couldn't imagine not. Didn't mean I loved my children any less. And it's really interesting that you're making the comment about women should be able to do it. And then I think to build on that, women should be accepting of other women based on whatever their choices are and their volition is. And they
Right.
shouldn't be critical or judgmental of it. They should say, you know what? That's fantastic. I'm going this route, you go that route. Let's meet at the park and push our kids on the swing and be good with that. And like, no judgment. Everybody chooses their own thing. So I like the fact that you brought that up. You're right. Women should have the should, and I think if they could support each other in their choices, it would be really, really nice just to build on that. That would be what I would add, because I think it's really
Right.
important. I think that when you have that sisterhood, when you have that the women behind you, it's just very powerful. I think it's really powerful versus knocking you down. And there's been some discussion, some conversations I've been having, which that comes up. I think your answer was a sort of a
Right.
different way around that, but a little, not that it was implied. Does that make sense to you?
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think especially in surgery, there's this kind of I mean, part of me was second guessing my decision to go into surgery because I had heard that, surgeon moms never see their children, or like there's so much you have to sacrifice. And I think at the end of the day, if you're doing anything that is meaningful, and like any kind of job that you choose, or any path, like sort of like the one, you're talking about, you're creative but you loved your work. I think there has to be room to be able to accommodate doing that, but also being able to, you know have a family. I think there's something, being able to give birth, like I've seen, obviously going through medical school, and in my training and stuff, I've seen so many live births, and I think it's just such a miracle that nothing can um really, it's hard to put into words how magnificent it is. And like, I want that for myself, and I think that it's so beautiful to be able to bring someone into this world. It's magical, and I think sometimes in my field, there's I think, like, there's sometimes, the sense that you have to give things up, but to be seen. But I don't have any kids yet, but I hope not.
Well, I think by the time you're ready, hopefully we'll advance a little more. And I think you just have to keep being who you are, doing you. And you know
Yeah,
what? Break the glass
it's all
ceiling where
good.
you need to. Do not
Yeah,
let anyone impose ways on you. And,
yeah,
you can be the first woman surgeon who says no or has a family. I mean, there's plenty of women surgeons who
yeah,
do and knows how to balance or figure it out. It's going to be hard regardless because
right,
working, whether you're home full time or working full time, it's raising a family is really hard. So it's just a different
right,
type of hard. So it's just how you're doing it. And, yeah. And that's just from someone who raised three kids and worked full time. It's hard. But you
right,
know what? I wouldn't have not wanted to do the things I've done. So, I mean, I feel so much gratitude to have three beautiful humans that I birthed, that I grew, that all the magic that you're suggesting. And of course, adding to this world, adding some color and wonder
mhm,
into this world by bringing children into this world. This departs, this next question, our podcast is called Under the Sisterhood. So you have to have one of these questions, but I think it's a really important one, which is, do you feel part of a sisterhood?
hmm. What would you define as a sisterhood? Like a group of women?
Well, it's how you define it. Do you feel part of a sisterhood? And then I could ask you, how do you define a sisterhood? And do you feel part of one? Or, I mean, I think it's been interesting to get people's answers because
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like, part of the sisterhood with Georgia, but I will say that, in a group setting, not as much, yeah.
I'm not surprised at that answer. I think it's really tricky when you're going out and you guys are all fighting for the spaces in both the classroom and then in the surgery, the rounds, whatever it may be. I think it's really, really tricky. It's interesting because I've had so many different types of answers. And one thing that stuck out, which which is probably how I would define being part of a sisterhood, is looking at, and I think you are like this because I know you for a number of years, is looking at all of women and wanting to lift them and looking at them as your sisters. Now, whether they
Mm,
respond the same way we feel is another
mm,
story, but I think being that type of woman who is a woman's woman and wants all women to be lifted and do well, is another way of looking at it. And this woman says, I have two children and I work really hard. So I have my family, but I feel this sisterhood. I'm a teacher and what have you. And so I really try and take care of the young women in my class, things like that. So it's just really interesting to hear that. And I'm not surprised. It's about finding those women that you connect. And also, it's
yeah,
not also necessarily, in some cases, it can be you're in a society or in a sorority, whatever it may be in college, and you take that group with you throughout your life. But in other cases, it can be that it might not be that there's 10 women who've been in a collective group like a sorority who you're still connected with. It could be people from all around, and those are your sisters. They might not be connected to each other, but they're your, you know what I'm saying? So
Mm,
while you said you felt that with Georgia, maybe there's other women in your life, but maybe you don't have a
yeah,
group. Because I would say the same
yeah,
thing. It's hard to band together the group.
yeah. But I definitely feel like the people who I connect closest with are women, and there's a sort of a shared identity when it's talking about kind of our we have a shared experiences. Um, I like that. I like that way of thinking about it because um, definitely I think maybe this was influenced by my culture, my parents' culture, but they didn't really want me talking to boys, and um, I think women have just been easier for me to turn to and feel safer around. Um,
And I
I don't know if
kind
you
of,
felt that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I didn't have the same cultural things, but for sure, I tended to think that way. I mean, I have felt over my lifetime a lot of competition. And I'm just like, you know what? My only competition, except like if I was on a or on a squash, like there I might be competing and maybe I'd lose, maybe I'd win. And it's okay. But ultimately, I always looked at competition of me against myself. And so when it came to women, it's like, I didn't think that way. And I found it to be, it's been an interesting life. I mean, I love women. I love my fellow women. I would do anything to help a sister, like, and it doesn't matter where they come from. And I think that that's sort of the mission I'm on is how to really help women, be seen, heard, and honored, but in a way that is so sacred, because I think that you can say that and you can listen, but I'm talking about hearing and affecting change. And how do you do that? And I think that, it's this question, do you feel part of a sisterhood? In some cases, women have multiple sisterhoods. In other cases, they've had conceptual sisterhoods. In other cases, they've moved to a new community and they have a child and they're able to create sisterhoods. And I think it's interesting because I think we all want it. I think women want it. And
Mhm.
it's just seeking out and finding those women that you connect best with. And because no one connects best with everybody. So
Mhm.
I think it would be great if women in general could take some of the walls down and be more supportive of each other. Because I think
Right.
if we were more unified, we'd have even more power than we already have.
Right. What makes you think, I guess, why do you think women compete with each other so much?
Why do I think that? I mean,
Yeah, why do we?
I, so what, it's interesting that you asked that question, because when I first started some of these conversations, I started to unpack that question in my mind, and I wondered if that could go down a rabbit hole. But one thing that comes to mind is, I think, in a little bit, and I'm not, I haven't done any research on this, so I'm going to be speaking just from my heart, which is, I think because we've grown up in a patriarchal system,
Yeah,
that everything has been about getting that external validation from the man. And I
right,
think because of that, we're all fighting for that attention. I don't even think it's a conscious thing. In some cases, it's
right,
conscious. In some things, it's just burned into our subconscious, in ways. And because we've been treated like second class citizens, so we're fighting each other to become the first class, to get into first class. And it's
right,
just ridiculous. I don't even think women are aware of it. And I think as they
right,
age, they become more aware of it and they're like, holy cow, why am I doing that? Or they never age out of it because it's such ingrained behaviors. So that would be my take on it. And as I haven't spent enough time to give it a hugely educated, but that because because I asked myself the same question, why
right,
would you feel like I want everyone to be lifted. I want every woman to do well. And I do want
right,
the women to do better than I want the men. Sorry to say, but it's just the truth. I want
right,
women
right,
to lean in and own their power and own their strength, and and imagine the world the way that they want to see it, and then to build it. I mean, that would just be
right,
beautiful. And if they supported each other, I think it would be, I mean, I think that some of the things, the challenges we're having right now are because of the patriarchal system that has been
right.
cast. So what do you think?
No, I that's kind of my intuitive answer too, is that I mean, I personally don't I'm kind of I think we're similar that we don't compete ourselves, but I definitely can feel that some women can feel threatened by me or um I don't know. I guess it was I grew up with two brothers, so I
Mhm.
didn't always have a very strong female figure to or like a sister to kind of um relate to or experience uh like life with and or like a biological sister. So but I feel like my experience with my brothers is that they don't compete in earnest, like, they will compete with other men for in sports and, like, in, work or whatever, but they don't have this, like a lot I guess just my brothers at least didn't have this, like, innate feeling of unworthiness or needing to be better than that guy or something. It was not it was more of, like, the game. Whereas I feel like for women, it's more about this innate feeling of unworthiness and scarcity, that scarcity of like I feel like it's a deep seated kind of sense of scarcity, and yeah, I feel like I, I will say like among women, sometimes I just like women who know how to operate with different women. Um, there's a game to also play and like knowing what to say and knowing how to be political and how to please people and talk a certain way. And I'm not very good at that. And um, I don't know. I think there's a little bit more backstabbing or kind of like saying one thing to your face and not saying something to think another thing behind your back and stuff. And I think it is what you're saying, like it's because of this uh being marginalized for so long, and also like that male gaze. I think we want that validation from, and for so long women's economic or their survival depended on what a man could provide, just like after the Neolithic age where we became this very agriculture based these communities, and I don't totally understand actually how women became subservient to men or how that inequality sort of arose from. But yeah, I think for so long things have depended on men for us, and we still have this mindset, you know?
It's so funny. The image that came to mind was gladiators when they're in the Colosseum and they're fighting like the slaves against each other, that women are like
Yeah,
that and they're just fighting to survive. And I'm saying
right,
metaphorically, but if
right.
women unpack that, if every woman sat with that and said, you know what, man, I am going to let this go. I'm going to do
Yeah,
this breathing. I'm going to meditate on this. I am going to let this go because it's so toxic. But I mean,
right.
I mean, that is something that would have to be addressed I mean, it's so systemically ingrained. I don't know what to say about it, but I mean, I'm like, whew, this is a deep conversation and stuff. And I think it's good. I think it's really important. But boy, I feel like I need to go back and start doing some studying on that on this subject, although it might be too heavy for me. So I think I like to deal with the conversations because,
Yeah.
this last question I think this is a great opportunity for you, Huma and Dr. Baig. Here you have this platform right now. You're on a podcast. We've been talking about your female experiences, what being a woman means to you, and if you were to give a message to women all around the world, and you go back to Pakistan, you go to other countries, what's the message? And of all ages, it's important not to focus on one. If there was one big message that you could give, where would you go with that?
It's to spend time discerning what feels right for you, what path feels right for you. And that's not even an intellectual necessarily or logical process, but it's really more of an intuitive process. And I feel like all too often as women, we're constrained by all of these external forces, like in the East and in the West, right? And I feel like we can kind of, and you know, we've had this conversation about like women pitted against each other, and I think it's so important. I'm still working on this, but like finding our inner voice and finding what feels right for us. And you know, there's different modalities to be able to discover that. And you know, for some people, it's pursuing a passion that's just theirs. For some people, it's silence and meditation or prayer, or you know, I think um, it's that's essential.
Oh, I think that's a beautiful answer. I just love, I love that. It's a really, I think it's a great question for us to each ask ourselves
Mhm.
if we have this opportunity to speak, like, what is it that we want to say to each other, and
Mhm.
understand the power of our voice. And I think I think throughout this whole discussion, I think if I end up with anything, it's like, some of our behaviors are ingrained, the systemic ingrained behaviors and stuff are all related to not being seen, not being heard, not being honored, not being validated, all the things. And I think it goes to your comment about the external world. And interestingly,
Mhm.
Huma, some of the conversations talked about the power, and you didn't use this word, but have it directly inferred it, which is really ensuring that you're understanding your path, your voice. That's
Mhm.
all internal work you do. So all of the work you do with
Mhm.
those modalities is going to be about healing and bringing out the best you and giving you the voice and figuring that out.
Mhm.
And then what happens is what the external world expects of you, you can decide that you know what, you no longer care about what the external world thinks of you, that you've figured out what you think of you. And once you get there, the
Mhm.
power in that is just amazing. But do you have anything on that, like that internal, external piece? Because I think that, once you figure out your voice, like what does that mean from an external point of view?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's about, I think so. This is something I've really struggled with throughout my life. I mean, I went down a very traditionally, sort of traditional path. Like medicine is something that I thought people, I do see myself as a healer, and that's something that's very, that's that's part of my identity. But there is this sort of relief that it was something that other people would approve of, right? It kind of embedded in it because it's a very traditional path to healing. Um, but I think finding your own, and I feel like I'm just realizing this as I say this to you, but finding your own voice and your own, you know, who you really are and your path will allow you to not like appease or satisfy what other people want, but to actually bring something of value to the world. Because I think we, you know, and this is so hard to practice, but we lack people who are really just doing what is true and right and real and authentic to them. But when people do that, you know, they just glow, and it's so helpful for the world too. And just finding that and being able to share your gifts with the world is all that matters,
I
you
love
know?
that. I
I love
love
that
that.
too.
That's just so beautiful. Now, okay, I'm working on that. I have a job to do. So this has been just an amazing
Oh my god.
conversation. Wow,
I
so
love this.
thoughtful, such terrific answers. Thank you so much. I couldn't be more grateful for your time
Oh,
today.
thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. We hope you will join us next episode to honor amazing women from around the world. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood, LLC, and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Zach Slaff, and edited by Zach Slaff. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.